Hey everybody, welcome once again to the Football Fandemic, where this week we are going to, surprise, talk about football. We're going to look at the records going forward as we come to those last 4 games before playoffs. We're going to make some Nostradamus picks and see who can do it best here on the Football Fandemic. So, as you heard in the intro there, the Nostradamus picks are becoming a thing. And I'm so big on it because last week only one of us got that correct. And the way I'm talking about it, you probably cannot tell which of us that was. It was me. That's right. I called Rams beating the Bills. Truthfully, when I called it, I didn't think it would happen. But if I had to pick one that was like a good size underdog, that was my choice. And I was telling Josh before the podcast started, someone came in. I was kind of busy on Sunday, and someone came in and said, "Man, the Rams are beating the Bills." I'm like, "Oh yeah, how much? And how much time's left?" And they told me, they're like, "There's 1 minute left, but Bills are on the 1 yard line." I'm like, they could still do this, but they were down by 9, I think it was. So I mean, it wasn't like a one score, So as it turned out, Rams won. And I was telling Josh before, I think Josh Allen in this loss increased his odds of becoming MVP because he threw 6, I think it was, touchdowns.
He threw 3 and then ran for 3.
Right.
So, and he became like the first quarterback in like since before the merger to ever do that. Jeez. Yeah. So a long time ago.
Long time. And I mean, he was carrying his team because what was the defense doing during all that? I'll tell you what they were doing. They were saying, "Rams, would you like to walk through here to the end zone?" There it is. They were just letting the Rams go over and over and over. So good for Josh Allen. Questionable for that defense. They got to figure something out as they head into playoffs here because you can't go in with a defense like that. And I was starting to say earlier that that's where the Lions have them. But then I looked at the Lions and man, the Lions are like so beat up on defense. They held on, but it's going to be a question of which team goes into the playoff with the strongest defense that you can count on. That'll be interesting to see.
And the big problem for the Bills is that the Lions kind of run a similar offense to the Rams, but they just do it more efficiently and better. So it's going to be potentially rough for that defense again if they can't, get their keys figured out and like figure out where they're supposed to be in their zones.
Luckily for them, hopefully, they may not have to face. Well, I mean, they won't have to face them until they get out of the AFC, and to do that, they've got to get past a team that I think is totally beatable, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs. But I say that, and I think it was somebody was looking at like 1-score games and how many they have. They're like 10-0 in 1-score games.
Yeah,
it's like ridiculous.
It's like from, I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Unbreakable, but it's like an M. Night Shyamalan film where Samuel L. Jackson, spoiler, Samuel L. Jackson's character ends up being the villain, and he has caused all of these accidents throughout times, like these plane crashes or train crashes, in order to find the superhero. And at the end, he's reading through all of like his newspaper headlines, like plane crash, no survivors, car accident, major car accident, no survivors, train crash, and there is one man who has survived and he is remarkably unharmed. That's the Kansas City Chiefs. They are the unbreakable. They are remarkably unharmed, even to the point where the field goal at the end to win the game knocks off of the upright and then goes through. Goes
like
in. One of that usually happens like once or twice a season when it goes the right way after hitting off of the uprights, and it just so happened to happen for the Chiefs again. So they just continue to use whatever voodoo magic to get themselves into these wins.
The question is, how much voodoo magic do they have left? Do they have enough to get to the Super Bowl and past, or is it going to run out just shy?
Well, let's think about it really quick, Matthew. So the Chiefs are 12-1, 12 wins, 1 loss. Do you remember who that loss was to?
Buffalo Bills.
The Buffalo Bills. So Buffalo has clearly shown, and they won 30-21. So it was more than a 1-score game. It was 9 points.
They were the one.
The Bills showed, hey, we could do this. We're not afraid. And I think if they come into playoffs, it's going to be a similar situation.
Now, the only good thing about Kansas City winning is that they were playing the Chargers, which is one of the teams ahead of the Colts in the wild card race. I was talking to Josh again just before the podcast about some teams with odds. We were talking about the 49ers tonight playing
the Rams.
The Rams, right? They're playing the Rams. And I was like, well, the 49ers, they need to probably just go ahead and concede this season. And if they lose tonight, they pretty much have. They go to a 0.13% chance of winning, which is rounded down to 0. It's technically, there's a way, but it's crazy, improbable. Now, the next team that has like such a big, if they win tonight, there's still I think it was a 11% chance of making the playoffs. It's not like it goes to a huge number, but there's another team that has a 56% chance if they win this week that drops to a 7% chance if they lose this week. And that is the Colts playing the Broncos. And we'll get into talking about what we might think will happen in that game. But these teams with dropping odds, this is the time of year where we're looking to see who's going to sew up the wild card spots. And it's funny to me that is it the Chargers and the Broncos both have 8 wins, or did that change with last night's?
They're both at 8-5, and so are the Ravens. So all three.
Well, that's what I was gonna. That was my next point. Is the other team that's there also has 8-5, and it's the Ravens. And nobody's talking about like, wow, the Ravens could lose and not get in. Everybody's like, well, they're going to get a wild card spot, but they're looking at the Chargers and the Broncos like, okay, will both of these continue to win? Now, granted, the Ravens probably are. I would like to say are a little bit better team, but at some point I'm going to have to look at the record of the Broncos and say, who was it that said you are who your record says you are? Who was that? Is that Parcells?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So the Broncos are who their record says they are. As much as I keep thinking they're just not a good team, I look down and they're 8-5. And so somehow they are who their record says they are. And I think I'm getting this confused with the press conference. They are who we thought they were, and we let them off the hook. Remember that one?
That was Denny Green, former Vikings.
Dennis Green with Arizona talking about the Bears. Yeah.
Yep.
But anyway, yeah. So we can get all that later. Speaking of Bills, there's another Bill that's making big news. His name ends in Belichick, and he has decided to go be a head coach at the University of North Carolina. Did anybody think this would happen? Somebody said there was a rumor, and I'm like, that's not going to happen. But guess what? It is.
Yeah, and it kept festering and festering, and I had the same kind of thought. I mean, these are credible sources, but it's got to be like Bill Belichick's agent or someone texting a reporter and to gain some leverage for the upcoming, NFL season. And that, like when Tom Brady and Julian Edelman and Rob Gronkowski were talking about, oh yeah, I can't see him, going to sit down in a high schooler's living room and tell him that he wants to. Ask him if he wants to come play with us. That's not what Bill Belichick does, and that even cemented further in my mind. Okay, this is just a leverage play, and then it comes out that he's released his Belichick Bible, is what the report said, which is 400 pages of what if North Carolina wants to hire him, which just a power move. By the way, right away, just like he knows what he can do. He knows that the NFL team maybe won't give him full control if he doesn't want to go to North Carolina, but he gives them this Belichick Bible and says, this is what the staff is going to be hired. This is how much money I need to recruit.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I thought that the biggest reason he would go is the total control, because that's one thing that at the NFL level, if anybody close to had it, he close to had it in New England. But once he left there, it's a question of could he get that anywhere else? And I think a lot of teams were kind of interested in Bill Belichick, but they did not want to give him everything he wanted. Thus, he began writing the Bill Belichick Bible or whatever it's called to make sure that he would have. And he loves having total control of the roster and total control of how you treat, the whole Patriot way thing is basically you guys got to line up according to the way I say, because it's going to be hard line here. And I think he got all of that there with his UNC thing.
I did see one report that it was there's potentially maybe some nepotism that crept into the uh, negotiations, where once he's finished there, they're supposed to hire his son to be the next head coach.
Is this all part of the contract?
I don't know if that's official yet. It's a report that I did read out there that adds an interesting twist to it. Uh, and that might be so if he's trying to set up his son. He's currently the defensive coordinator for Washington, the collegiate program.
Right. So you think he'll stay in Washington this next year, or do you think he'll move over to UNC and start prepping that path there?
I'm not sure yet. Not sure on that one.
So Bill Belichick getting control of the teams, getting the money he wanted, being able to do all the recruiting himself because he likes that, being able to say it's going to be my way or the highway, the Patriot way, which is now, I guess, the Tar Heel way. That's North Carolina, right? The Tar Heel way. And get his son in there.
Now, we are fortunate, Matthew. We have someone in our fantasy football league that has a degree from University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill.
Oh, yeah? Who's that?
Mr. Bryan, our let me screen right past you. And the moment this happened, the exact moment it happened, well, the source I find most credible, Ian Rappaport, because I don't deal with Adam Schefter. I sent this right to Brian and his sister Lauren, who is also a big UNC football fan, and she also went to school there. Their response was, ugh, I would have preferred Mac Brown, Tony the Tiger, and Phil Smith. All could have done better. And Brian said, hashtag not my capitalized coach. So I don't think my sample size of people is too happy about this hiring.
Well, he didn't end great in New England. And so people may be saying, yeah, without Tom Brady and without, whatever that core was at that time, does he have it? So it remains to be seen. We'll have to see how he does at the college level, but he's probably wanting to get in there and do a Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah. And going back to your record is who you say you are, his record coming out of the pandemic was awful.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons he did not get an NFL head coaching job. We talked about him. We know he was in the building with the Falcons having conversations. Let's label it as. I'm not sure if it was super serious, how far or the extent of those conversations. But that seemed to be the only team that might have stuck with him. And they obviously did not.
And I think, again, it probably came down to Bill saying, I want this, I want this, I want control of this, and it's going to be this. And they're like, well, no, we want you to be the coach, but we also still need some checks and balances and a GM and all that. And he's like, nope, I'm going to go write my Bible and then publish it.
And what did not happen is he did not wait for the Chicago Bears to put out a hiring. He said, I just got to get off of this list. I am not going to be with the Bears. I just can't do it.
Couldn't do it.
And he's like, the thing, his biggest flaw has been like he's not good at drafting or bringing in free agents. Like when he is in control of things, and that's going to be a big part of college. And maybe that's why he hires his own recruitment staff so that he can kind of delegate that a little bit more. But like you can have whatever scheme you want in college, but you also need the correct players to be able to execute even more so than in the NFL, because like there is such a wide range, even in Division I, from what the top guys at the positions can do and what the lowest guys at the positions can do. So that's going to be the one head scratching thing. If he gets the right guys, if maybe he's a little bit more hands off with the recruitment, like the reports say he might be, then I think like if he can just focus on coaching, they should be good to go. But yeah, like his ability to pick players is probably what, at least over the last decade, has been kind of what has left New England in a rough spot. But he did make the playoffs with Mac Jones, of all people. So there's that as well.
I think his contribution to the draft or to the recruitment process is his name. Because, young college kids looking at different colleges will be like, Bill Belichick, my goodness, especially if they're defensive players, they'll be like, oh, I want to play with him, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if offensive players would think that much about it or not. But he's going to basically increase the size of the interested pool for whoever he decides to put in charge of that. Hopefully they make good decisions based on that.
Let me look something up really quick, because we are starting to enter an era where I'm not sure if all of these kids watched any of the Patriots dynasty. So it might
Yes,
hit slightly different, right? So 2019 was their last Super Bowl win. Before that, just five years ago, almost 6 years ago.
I mean, it's true that they may not have watched him live, but like anybody who's like deep into football gets into some football history, they know that I mean, it'd be really hard, even a young guy coming in now, to not have heard of the Patriots and Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. I mean, it would be hard. How about this other news? Joe Burrow had his house broken into. Probably this same South American crime ring that does it during games, because it was during a game, right? But it wasn't just that he had his house broken into, but then his privacy was just shot all to pieces because some girl, and I'm going to show my ignorance here, some girl who's like a model or something was there at the house and called it in, and evidently like they're romantically involved, and she was there like at 3 a.m. or whatever time it was, and everybody's like, whoa, what's going on now? And it became this huge story, and Joe Burrow's like, I feel like my privacy was invaded in more than one way this weekend. And so I don't know how everybody got word that she was the one that called the police, if the police leaked that. I just don't know how a journalist would know otherwise, right? But
unless the journalist was the one robbing the house. I think we're on to something, Matthew.
or maybe anybody, like, crime stuff, whenever there's like a reported burglary or something, they fill out a report and it becomes common knowledge. I don't know. And her name was in there. So anyway, somehow somebody found out, and then it became big news all over the internet. And I don't know if he had anything stolen or not, because she was calling, she was in the house, and she was like, what should I do? And, I don't know if they scared the people away or what happened.
Oh, maybe. Here's a new storyline: is since his purchase of a $3 million Batmobile, she's actually like a modern day Alfred, like watching over his manor. It's not a romantic relationship. She is Alfred, but it's like it's a front, right? So putting it as the romantic relationship for Joe Burrow fighting crime at night is probably much less of a secret than finding out Joe Burrow is actually Batman.
Joe Burrow, the first blonde Batman, right? I guess Val Kilmer was a Batman.
Yeah,
he's blonde, so
you don't see his hair. He's under the mask,
right?
Where is she? Right.
The better part would be when he's in talking to Alfred, and it's really that girl. That would be the big clincher in the movie. All right, could you guys have any other news that we definitely need to give our opinion and commentary on?
I mean, the 49ers look great this weekend. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Explain.
They manhandled Chicago.
They did.
Could not be happier.
And I've heard people say, hey, I know that they've looked really bad, but they manhandled Chicago. But my thought was, well, they manhandled Chicago.
My favorite play of that whole game is Caleb Williams drops back to pass. His form is absolutely perfect. It's stunning. And he looks like he's throwing a full pass and then ends up spiking the ball because he couldn't release the ball in time.
Yeah, it looked like he might have like seen a defender at the last second and was like, "Oh, I gotta tuck this, or else I'm not gonna, or else I'm gonna throw a pick," and then it just, slips out of his hands. But I get that it was the Bears, but they in the first half outgained them 319 to 4 in terms of yardages. So that's like, if we remember that Lions Jaguars beat down, that's about how dominant Detroit was for the entire game. San Francisco was on pace at that point to be even more dominant than that. So they had a dominant first half, and then they just decided to kind of coast a little bit more in the second half, and I think still outscored the Bears after halftime.
So we'll see tonight if they can carry this determination and put togetherness into a game against LA. That'll be interesting.
Actually, we will see Monday night if the Bears can continue their streak against their Vikings.
I hope so.
Let's see. Let's go through some games. Let's start with your game, Brandon. We'll just go through them in order like we did before. But the Packers and the Lions game, this is one obviously that we talked a lot about last week, and this was one that had major implications. It was probably the game to watch during the week as far as like not knowing how it would turn out, and it lived up to it. I mean, it was a high scoring game, and the truth is, at the end, either team could have won. Brandon, walk us through what you saw in Packers Lions.
Oh my gosh, it makes me like fear and respect Dan Campbell even more. I mean,
Man,
some of
all
these
those fourth
calls,
downs.
some of these calls he was making, like gambling literally the entire game and going for it on on 4th and 2 and getting it successfully for Detroit, not so successfully for Green Bay. It wasn't good for us, but just I don't know a ton of head coaches that are going to do that.
The legend grows. And
Yeah,
people will look back at this era of Lions, and when they say Dan Campbell, a feeling will come into all of us, and it will be that one. Like, will not stop at anything, grind through. The whole bite your kneecaps thing was not just words he said. That's what he lives.
Yeah, and it really could have gone either way. Something I appreciated that I think a ton of fans were upset about is I felt like most of the game the refs let the players play.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, of course, there's going to be calls that could have been called either way for either team, and I appreciate the no call on both teams for most things because I think that's more exciting of a football match. And it was nothing that put any players in jeopardy for their health. That's a different discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But just getting out there, letting the players play, and you could see Matt LaFleur was making adjustments like crazy the entire game. He's trying to figure out exactly what Dan Campbell is thinking. And no one knows what Dan Campbell is thinking. It was the most extreme of extremes I've seen in a long time on aggressiveness from a head coach and their play calling. And I appreciate that as a football fan. Like it makes the game more exciting. And obviously, if you don't pull it off, everyone's like, oh, Dan Campbell's an idiot. Why would he ever do this? But if you pull it off, they're like, oh my gosh, he's legitimately a madman, and we all need to fear this guy.
And the best thing is what he's doing here with what they had 11 wins before this week.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying, we're going to make the playoffs. I want my team to know that I totally 100% believe in them, and I put them in these positions because I believe they're going to come through as players. What's the downfall if he loses? Well, could lose that number 1 seed, I guess. But man, the benefit of going into playoffs with your team knowing he believes in us and we believe in each other because we've done this so many times.
Yeah, and Detroit hasn't secured the number 1 seed yet. They're the favorite to get it in the NFC right now. But if they get it, no one is going to doubt that they didn't earn it. It's like, oh, well, this game could have went this way, or no. Like Detroit full on earned that number 1 seed and home field advantage all the way through the playoffs. I enjoyed the game as a football fan. Obviously disappointed in the loss, but I don't think the Packers played poor by any means. There was a few things that were questionable, but Detroit also had some questionable things that didn't go their way. It happens in a football game. There's not a perfect game unless you're talking about Matt LaFleur playing Sean McVay. Then there are perfect games. But it was a good game. Good game to watch as a fan. I'm overall pleased with what the Packers did against the Lions, a very aggressive team. And saddened that it came down to a last-second field goal. Abigail and I were both trying every trick in the book to have Detroit miss that field goal. We were blowing in certain directions.
Calling timeouts from your couch.
And we tried everything. We were unsuccessful in that endeavor, but us as fans and owners were involved the entire game.
Yeah.
Jordan Love looked like really good in this game on a couple of throws. And it started after kind of like a middling, a little bit like first quarter, he really got going. On one of the drives, like they were at the goal line, they run this tight end leak play where Tucker Kraft gets open and he misfires. Mm-hmm. He responds well to missing that throw. And later on in the drive, or later on, I think a couple plays later, he throws an absolute rocket to Tucker Kraft in pretty good coverage to beat just break through and get it into his hands. And then of course the play where he's being pressured and then jumps kind of and contorts his body and then is still able to get it out to, I think it was Christian Watson.
Christian Watson. Yeah.
That was just an incredible way to get your body reset after you've had to get out of the pocket because of the oncoming pressure. Like, not a lot of guys are going to be able to flip their hips that quickly and still make that strong and that accurate of a throw. So, I mean, you got to like what you saw from Jordan Love. And then I think that we saw a little bit of some of the kinks in the armor of Jared Goff out there on that Keshawn Nixon interception. It was just a bad read all around. Like, he thought they were playing, it looked like he thought that they were playing cover 2 zone because he was expecting Nixon to go out and cover the running back in the flat, and he just threw it right. They were playing cover 2 man, and he threw it right to where Nixon was. Now, he obviously bounced back from that, but there were a lot fewer, I feel like, multiple read throws that Jared Goff made. So I think maybe you can try to confuse Goff, but like he pre-reads a defense typically better than anybody in the NFL. So that's why it's a little bit more difficult to stop, especially when they use motion to get you to kind of show your cards on the defensive side of the football.
Yeah, and with that, I don't think the Packers adjusted well throughout the game on defense to stop the short game, which obviously gives Detroit a ton of credit for just attacking the Packers' weakness. But Jeff Hafley was not going to let up big plays. He was going to let up short plays, and we saw a lot of that from Detroit. And the one big play they were trying to go for, it resulted in a Jared Goff interception. Ben Johnson said, all right, we're not going to push it. We're just going to take what we can have and go from there. And really smart by Detroit to be able to do that.
So that was a good game. That was our Thursday game. Not typically the day of the week where you get these great games. So that one was fun to have on a Thursday. Then you got to see the Packers used to be quarterback on Sunday against the Dolphins go into overtime and still not make it. And then go and talk on, everybody interviewing them. And was it Garrett said, we just got a losing gene. And he's like, oh, I do think we have to snap this curse. We have a curse we have to snap here. What do you guys think of the Dolphins and Jets? Dolphins winning in overtime.
Aaron Rodgers looked really good in that game. He made a lot of accurate throws, and he seemed to be a lot more in rhythm than he has been throughout most of this season. But the game situation, the Jets just could not get it done. And a lot of it is because they allowed a big kick return right after kicking the go-ahead field goal with under a minute left to play. The Dolphins are able to start with the ball right around midfield and only have to make a couple of plays to get into field goal range. So special teams was the major issue there, but I thought that Aaron Rodgers looked incredible. There was one throw that he made in the first half where I forgot who it was to, but it was right over the middle of the field, and it was right after receiving the snap. So it was just this quick pass that goes 10 yards down the field, and he couldn't have walked it to the wide receiver any better and placed it in his hands any better if he had stopped time or something. That's how good the throw was. It was in the most ideal of places. And then he just continued to be accurate throughout the game. Just was not enough. And the Dolphins, once again, playing their brand of football, which is just do a lot of runs, short passes, and these long methodical drives. We've seen now these first halves. We talked about a couple of weeks ago when they played the Raiders. Now with the Jets, I think there were only 3 or 4 possessions for each team in the first half. And it's because the Dolphins are just controlling the clock and not going for the big plays, kind of like Brandon was talking about with what the Packers were letting the Lions do. That's just kind of what the Dolphins want to do, is just get these 6-yard passes, or maybe go down a little bit deeper down the field on some of these crossers to Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. But it was just methodical drive after methodical drive, and they were efficient with it, and they scored points at the end of those drives, and that kind of kept them in the game when Aaron Rodgers early on was kind of tearing their defense up a little bit.
It's going to be one of these things that when we get to the end of this season, the last game, I really want to spend some time talking about, do you think Aaron Rodgers is going to come back for another season with the Jets? We've kind of already briefly mentioned it. What none of us can really know what the temperature of the team and the quarterback is until we see these last 4 games and see if they like lose every one, if they go on a winning streak. Of course, that's going to change the trajectory and the outlook. So I'm looking forward to seeing, is he done or is he committed to him and Devontae staying there? And then is the team okay with keeping him there? And that's going to be a last week of the regular season discussion, I think.
Yeah, and they play Jacksonville this upcoming week. I think they're already eliminated from the playoffs. The Jets are. They were one of our recent additions this past week. Jets eliminated. And they play Jacksonville coming up. Not a particularly strong team, much weaker than Miami.
Eliminated and in line for the first overall pick, right?
Yeah, and so that might be a game just to key into to see, okay, are they only involved on tougher teams, or are they letting up their preparation during the week for not as tough teams? We'll find out. And they get Mac Jones.
There still are two win teams. So they're both the Jets and the Jaguars are behind the Raiders and the Giants. So as far as that run for the number 1 overall pick. So let's see. Here was a good one. Falcons, Vikings. We were talking about this one a little bit. It was Kirk Cousins coming back to Minnesota. Did not go his way. Did go Josh's way and kept the standings in the NFC North pretty much where they have been. What do you got to say about that, Josh? What do you think about this game?
Yeah, it is like going to your 10-year high school reunion and bringing your super successful wife with you and like saying hi to your ex-girlfriend that you took to prom your senior year. And her life is not going as well. It's kind of a wreck at that point. That's what it was for the Minnesota Vikings, is they got to see, they got to show off Sam Darnold, their wife in this metaphor, and he had the best game of his career. And granted, it was against a defense for the Falcons that is a little bit rough. I mean, Bo Nix had his best game of his career against the Falcons too, just a couple of weeks prior. So like Sam Darnold just took advantage of that. He throws for 5 touchdowns in a 42-21 win. The game was a little bit closer because than the final score indicates. It was tied going into the 4th quarter. Minnesota scored, and then Atlanta fumbled the next kickoff, and then Minnesota scored from there to kind of make it look a little bit uglier than it actually was. But some of the things that like Minnesota is doing with, now that they have Hawkinson back for the last couple of weeks, like Addison and Jefferson are a lot of times tight to the formation on the same side of the field. So they have room both to the outside and to the inside, and they'll usually motion one of the two so they'll start out on opposite sides and they'll motion one of them towards the other side of the field. So now they're seeing, okay, is the defense playing in man? Are they playing in zone? And they can kind of get a numbers advantage if they're playing in man and are going to bring a couple safeties over to try and stop both Jefferson and Addison. Then TJ Hawkinson on the other side can get open in one-on-one coverage on a short little hitch route or something like that. So they were able to kind of exploit those matchups. I don't think the Falcons were playing the best defense against them either. They were playing a lot of cover 1 man, which against Jefferson and Addison, you're really forcing your deep safety to commit to one of those players or the other. And whoever that safety, I think it was Jesse Bates, typically committed to, Sam Darnold just read that and threw to whichever of the other ones was open. Most of the throws he made were like pretty like standard. There weren't a lot of tight window throws, but there was one play where he's getting pressured, like is able to escape the pressure, step up, and then he has Justin Jefferson wide open downfield. And I don't know if you guys saw that clip. It was really fun to watch as a Vikings fan, but if you're a Falcons fan, you've got to wonder, what is D. Alford doing? It's like if you're playing like Madden and you accidentally switch to the cornerback in man coverage, you switch your player to that player instead of like the blitzing linebacker, and you kind of freeze for a second, then you start panicking and can't find the ball. D. Alford like let Jefferson get right by him and then was like, oh crap, I gotta get back here, and then ran towards the corner of the end zone, nowhere near where the ball was being thrown to. It's just like he was like, I'm gonna guess that it's going over here, but it wasn't going over there. So and then it was nice. Like Kirk Cousins had a decent game. He made two critical mistakes, one critical mistake because one of his interceptions came when they were already down 14 at that point. But he did throw two picks, and it was just nice. Like I liked Kirk Cousins when he was here. Like it kind of hurt my heart a little bit when he, even though understandable, it's a business, he takes more money to go to Atlanta, and you kind of feel scorned by that. And so it was nice to hold him without scoring or throwing any of the touchdowns, and also having him throw two interceptions to our defense. So it was just like a heartwarming game for Vikings fans all around.
Let me ask you this. Does there come a point, if you keep winning, you win like the rest of this year, does there come a point where you're like, Sam Darnold's only, 29? Maybe we keep him and we just let JJ sit and watch via, Aaron Rodgers or Jordan Love, the way they had to sit for more than 1 year and watch. And we ride this hand that's hot with this team until he's not hot. Then we bring JJ and we say, okay, you're still our future sometime. Don't get antsy. Do you think there's a point where that happens?
Watching this game was the first time that I legitimately had that thought. Like I'd heard kind of those thoughts and the buzz around that throughout the whole season whenever Darnold was playing well. I think you're going to have to commit too much capital to Sam Darnold that will prevent you from spending in other areas in free agency where the Vikings need to potentially fix, like the interior of their offensive line or their defensive line. And I think you have faith in Kevin O'Connell as the quote-unquote quarterback whisperer. You see what he's able to do with Sam Darnold, who is much maligned by the league. JJ McCarthy is going to be cheaper, and I know it's more of an unknown, but I think you kind of trust that O'Connell is able to get him to where he needs to be. Look, like even in the offseason before McCarthy got injured, O'Connell had his O'Connell Bible, in that he had certain benchmarks that JJ would have needed to reach to become the starting quarterback in the system, almost like a video game. So I think that's going to stick, and I think, JJ McCarthy is a guy who works hard. Like his 2022 college film looks pretty horrendous. His 2023 college film looked so much better. So that's kind of what I base off his hard work ethic is. He made so much improvements in his game in 1 year at college, now being injured and going on and having all this time to kind of spend with the offense. I think it sets the Vikings up well going forward if they choose the McCarthy route instead of the Darnold route, as much as it will probably hurt to see Sam Darnold go in the offseason.
Well, let me ask this question. What is the price point that makes Sam Darnold too much? What if you get something pretty fair? Let's say it's a 2-year contract. After his first season, you're like, okay, he's still pretty solid. We can get some nice capital for him by trading him after the first season and then starting JJ. What's that price point for Minnesota?
Man,
because he's not a $55 million quarterback,
right?
Is it 40, 35?
I wouldn't want even the Baker contract. I wouldn't want to put this is finally an off season where the Vikings have a lot of money to spend. They had kind of been handicapped by a lot of dead money, or active money when they had Kirk Cousins, but dead money this year from Kirk Cousins and Danielle Hunter. That money comes off the books. And if it was $30 million a year, I could see that for a 2-year deal, but I don't think that I think he's going to get better offers than that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the reasons that you bring in Daniel Jones at the end of this year, even though he's a pending free agent, is so that he can kind of learn the offense. And if JJ is not ready, it's another quarterback project that Kevin O'Connell has, and a kind of a similar type of player, a guy drafted by New York who has struggled, and now has a chance for new life. And that doesn't mean he's guaranteed to look exactly like Sam Darnold, but we've all seen some of his measurable talents and his ability to rush the football and have a big arm. I think he can be that. If you want to re-sign him, he can be the guy that you would that you were hoping Darnold would be this year before McCarthy got injured, which is, okay, the veteran that can start a couple of games and then pave the way for JJ. I think Daniel Jones can play that role at a cheaper rate than what Sam Darnold is going to cost moving forward.
Yeah. And it comes to that. A lot of fans are like, oh, but why in the world would we let this guy go? He did great. But it does come down to, well, to keep him, there's an opportunity cost of we can't get this, and this. And fill these holes and help the team overall. A lot of times, kind of casual fans don't think about the cost of the whole team. They're just looking at one or two positions.
And the Vikings, they didn't spend all of their money, or they didn't have all of Kirk Cousins' money on their contract this offseason. And they were able to fill some needs already with Van Ginkel in free agency, with Greenard, and then Blake Cashman, who whenever he's on the field this season, the Vikings have won every single game that he's played in. Their 2 losses were games where he was out. So you've gotten those free agents that have already made a difference. Your general manager kind of has like an eye for that, even if he's not great at drafting so far. He's got a proven track record in bringing in free agents. So if you can get even more of that going forward, you've got a pretty good team to build your rookie quarterback or second year quarterback next year around.
Now, let's say Minnesota goes on, wins the Super Bowl with Darnold. Does that sweeten the pot to sign him? Does that?
It makes it harder not to, doesn't it?
because what are the odds that a second year quarterback is going to come in and win the Super Bowl? Statistically, it's almost never happened.
What are the odds that a Michigan national champion would come in his second year and win the Super Bowl? Tom Brady did that. No, but listen, if Sam Darnold wins the Super Bowl, I don't care what happens. Like, honestly, like the first Super Bowl in Vikings, like they want to keep Sam Darnold. Like that's what the goal is, and I've never experienced that.
Have the Vikings never won a Super Bowl?
Nope, they've been to 4 and have lost every single one. They didn't go to 4 consecutive like the Buffalo Bills. But yeah, if they win the Super Bowl this year, like whatever works will work. Like I will be satisfied watching football for that'll buy me a decade of satisfaction no matter what, even if they go 0-7. Well, maybe not that, but like it'll buy me a lot of satisfaction moving forward. And
I was gonna say, you always feel like it's gonna buy you more satisfaction than it actually does. When Peyton won with the Colts, I'm like, yes, but then it wasn't too many years later. I'm like, what's going on here?
and to be clear, no major Minnesota sports team has won a championship in my lifetime. The Twins, Timberwolves, Wild, and Vikings. None of them have won since I was born in 1994. So, I would be ecstatic.
Yeah, please don't turn into like a Bears fan if you never win the Super Bowl again that only remembers the year 2024, right? The way they remember 1985.
No promises, right?
We don't have a Super Bowl shuffle, so we don't have any novelties there, unfortunately.
Not yet.
Not yet. Moving on, Saints and Giants. Who cares? Saints won 14-11. Was there anything in that game that was like, oh, we must talk about this? Because I can't think of anything. The Saints won.
Derek Carr got injured, and it wasn't the worst game of the week.
He's out for the season, right? Derek Carr's out for the season.
He might still be available. They said he broke his forearm, and they said that he might even be available this week. I doubt that. I think that's more just Darren Rizzi being Darren Rizzi. Yeah. But it's probably going to be either Jake Haener or Spencer Rattler the rest of the way for them.
I guess they're only 2 games back in that crazy NFC South division. And maybe they think, oh, we still have a shot, but yeah. Then we went to another game in that one team in that division, Panthers Eagles. This was a Nostradamus pick by Josh that the Panthers would end up upsetting the Eagles. Did not happen. 22-16 Eagles win, and Eagles, crazily enough, beginning of this year, I was like really high on Washington, and Eagles have just come back to take that division by storm. And not only that division, they're like sitting right behind the Lions in the NFC for number 1 seed. Any thoughts on the Eagles beating the Panthers?
I mean, I'm not surprised. I'm more surprised that it was a 1-score game.
Yeah.
Did not expect that.
I feel like the Scooby-Doo villains, like I would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for Xavier Legette dropping a touchdown pass in the final minute of the game. Like Bryce Young made a perfect throw to him, and Xavier Legette just wasn't able to haul it in. I mean, granted, the Eagles could have gone down and kicked a field goal because they still had some time left, but it was not to be, and they get the turnover on downs, and Philadelphia wins. But Bryce Young made some good throws on that last drive, stepped up in the pocket. Stats don't look great, but that last drive, we were seeing him throw some rockets. So he's making progress.
Then we had Steelers-Browns. This was a division game. I think it turned out how everybody expected it would. Steelers won, but Steelers at the beginning of the year, we were all about the Bills. We were still about the Chiefs because they, won last year. We were about the Lions because they looked so dominant. Commanders at that time, but Eagles weren't written off. But no, I don't know that there was a lot of buzz around the Steelers at all because they had this. Who's our quarterback? What's it going to look like? They started with Justin Fields because Russell Wilson was supposed to be the starter, but he got hurt. And then it's like
Injured.
a big question.
Yeah.
And then here they are. And truthfully, do you think they're a team that could win the Super Bowl? I mean, Russell Wilson has been playing better than he has looked, anytime with the Broncos, but even the last year or so with the Seahawks, he's playing better than that now. Their defense is looking good. They have a running back. They have some. Yeah. Do you think they're a team that could get in the Super Bowl conversation?
I don't think so. I still place a lot more value on Buffalo to manhandle them. Now, I think if we ever saw a Buffalo Pittsburgh game, it's going to be a high scoring game without a doubt. Josh Allen's going to find a way to be the premier player in that game. It could be 19 touchdowns and they're all rushing and he doesn't throw for more than 2 yards, and he can do that. I fully trust that Josh Allen could be a running back in the NFL, standing behind center. But Russell Wilson has not looked bad. He's, I might say, more of a comeback of the year type of candidate so far. Last season in Denver, there was nothing really to write home about. They said, "Hey, we don't really want you here. We're going to bench you and start someone else. And this is just going to be your life. You're never going to fulfill your role as an NFL quarterback." And he kind of came back and said, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa! Like I'm a Super Bowl champion. Like I've done some major things in this league. Don't write me off just yet. Let me show you." And so I think that would be a fun matchup to see. I still think Buffalo is ahead of Pittsburgh. I think they have more on the line, and they're a bit hungrier overall as an organization than Pittsburgh is right now. But Pittsburgh's done just really, really well under their coach Mike Tomlin.
Mm-hmm.
Just winning seasons, like not necessarily winning them handily like they are this season, but they do have a really solid approach to just going and keeping their head to the ground and doing stuff that's not insignificant for the NFL, but they always fumble it away in the playoffs. And so that might be something still looming over them. Russell's still young in this organization. And was it this game, Josh, or was it?
Say still young, but in this organization.
Yeah. Like they've only been there since this offseason, so they haven't had the pain that Josh Allen has felt in Buffalo over the past few years.
But sometimes those teams that just kind of consistently plug along, when you have other teams that can have meteoric games and like what in the world happened games, and they just kind of go up and down like that, one of those consistent teams can be the one to go knock them out.
Yeah, that's true. I felt like it was this week or last week. Josh, you might have seen more on this, but they started incorporating a little bit of Justin Fields behind center as well, almost like they're doing with Taysom Hill down in New Orleans.
Yeah, it adds an interesting punch to the offense. They did it first at the end of the Commanders game where they were trying to run out the clock, and like they got some good plays because the Commanders had struggled to stop Najee Harris, so they were all keying in on him, and Justin Fields almost picked up the first down, but he decided to slide short of the line of gain. And they still ended up picking up the first down because of the Russell Wilson hard count or whatever. But yeah, they've been doing that a little bit. It hasn't been as effective since that Washington game, and has kind of like thrown in like some clunkiness into like the rhythm that Russell Wilson has. But if they can get that that down, then that's certainly another part of what their offense can do come playoff time. And I mean, Arthur Smith, it was kind of a boring offensive coach with Atlanta, but working in some more things as the offensive coordinator here in Pittsburgh. But I will say, I think Pittsburgh's has the most complete defense at each level in the AFC. I think with Watt, Highsmith, Herbig on the defensive line, Patrick Queen as a linebacker, then guys like Minka Fitzpatrick and Joey Porter Jr. in the secondary. I think they have a lot of that on lock, and defense wins championships is a cliche. Now, there are a lot of tough teams in the AFC, and I think the path is a little bit more difficult because these teams are going to beat up on one another. But I think I said after Russell Wilson's first game as the starter that if he continues to play like this, then and can show a pattern of that and trend that way, then yes, the Steeler team can be a Super Bowl contender. And I think Russell Wilson has continued to play like that first game where he's been effective. He hasn't been perfect, and a lot of it is just having the willingness to just throw one-on-one matchups that Justin Fields didn't have, because they've got guys like George Pickens who can make contested catches, but he has that willingness and he's making accurate throws on those deep balls. And yeah, I think this is a Super Bowl contending team. Honestly, I think there's a lot of teams in the AFC that can call themselves Super Bowl. Like I think 5 or 6 teams, like depending on how I feel about the Chargers on a certain day, like can be contenders and have a shot at getting into the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I don't know if I would. I don't know if I would feel like the Chargers are there yet, but you're right. I think there's several teams in the AFC that could be, especially when you look at the Chiefs. Yeah, they're doing that 10-0 in one-score games, but at some point that comes back to bite you. Law of averages brings it back. So moving on, we got Raiders, Buccaneers. I don't think this was a surprise. Buccaneers won. What I would like to say is Buccaneers won this week. The Falcons lost this week. That puts them up how many games now? I don't even know.
Just one, because they were tied, but the Falcons had the tiebreaker going into it. So I think the Buccaneers are up 1 game right now.
So this makes
technically like half a game.
Every game for Kirk Cousins becomes very important now because he's got to not have more stumbles like he's had the last few weeks. He's got to get in there and win some games if he wants to stay in that NFC South picture. But yeah,
he has not thrown. Oops, sorry. He has not thrown any touchdowns in the last 4 weeks, like Kirk Cousins, and he's thrown 8 interceptions. So it has been like when you're talking about the rough play of Kirk Cousins.
Yeah,
like that's how rough it's been.
He's got to stop that. Unfortunately, I do think the Buccaneers, if given the shot, will take that division away from him, and I don't think the Falcons are going to end up with a wild card spot. Just looking at the other winning teams in the conference. Jaguars Titans was another who cares game. Jaguars did beat the Titans. Again, who cares? Mac Jones beat Will Levis. Will Levis, I mean, their coach, who is it? Ben Johnson? Or what's his last name?
Don't desecrate Ben Johnson like that.
The Titans coach.
Yeah, it's Callahan, Brian Callahan.
Brian Callahan. What am I talking about? Brian Callahan, who came from Cincinnati. They play Cincinnati this week, and he was talking about how oh yeah, Joe Burrow would have my vote for MVP. And then they ask him, what about Will Levis? It's like, well, he's continuing to grow, and he's not doing things he shouldn't, completely not do. It's like his coach speak was like going off the radar as he was trying to say, well, I don't know yet. I don't know if we're going on with him in 2025 or not, but we're still seeing if he can grow. So that was the Titans. Titans lost to the Jaguars. Big deal.
And that one was the worst. That one was the worst game of the week that I was foreshadowing earlier.
Yeah. They're both out of the playoffs. They're no good. Blah. Seahawks Cardinals was a interesting game because they are fighting for that division. Seahawks won as I expected they would, and put them more in the driver's seat for winning that division now, up 1 game of the Rams, up 2 games from both the Cardinals and 49ers. That division's still super close across the board, within 2 games across the board, but it looks to me like that's going to be a Seahawks. Did you guys have any thoughts on Seahawks Cardinals?
Yeah, I think it's going to be the Seahawks taking the division. They're going to take an L this week. But that's okay because they can win out the rest of their season.
I take it they're playing the Packers this week.
Oh, you betcha.
I had not looked forward, but I could just somehow get my sixth sense going, and I could tell. Let's see. We have Bills, Rams. We talked about already. Rams won that one. Bears, 49ers.
One more thing out in that game that we didn't mention. With Josh Allen's performance in the history of fantasy football, that makes him the highest scoring quarterback ever in fantasy football.
Josh has him in his fantasy football league, right?
Evan.
No, Josh here in our group.
Yes, one of my leagues I have Josh Allen. So it was I'd already made the playoffs and couldn't get like a different.
Was he on your bench or did you start him?
Oh, I started. Yeah, I mean, if you're Josh Allen as your quarterback,
I had him on the bench because he's just Josh Allen, you know.
Because Geno Smith was going to do better this week.
A win or loss didn't help or hurt me in any way in that league, but it was still fun to see him put up 51 points.
Yeah, you were part of history right there. Highest scoring quarterback ever.
That's great. How much did he score in a typical standard league?
I think it was like 53.
So much. That's a big score.
Yeah, we have some point multipliers in our league to highlight some bigger things. So he had 63 total in our league, which was huge for the Dirty Birds because they're in first. And they just, oh my gosh. Dirty Birds, do it again.
Okay, so that was an important note. We already talked about this next game. 49ers demolished the Bears, kept their hopes alive. They need to continue that every single week because if they lose tonight, 0.13 is the percent chance that they'll make the playoffs. Then we had the Chiefs beating the Chargers, expected, but again, only 2 points. 2 points. Just not a great looking win since I can remember. I guess Kansas did have one big win, I feel like.
Yeah,
I can't remember which one it is, though.
So far this season. Let me look up.
They've had evidently 10 one-score games that they've won every one of. So you can't have a whole lot more when we're only at, 13 games in?
They beat the 49ers by 10.
They had maybe a 12-point win against the Saints, I think.
Yeah, 26-13, 13-point win against the Saints.
So
and those are the only 2 games that were not 1-point games.
Yeah, so not huge. Not huge, right?
And not against great teams.
Yeah.
It's like the Vikings of 2022 had like an 11-0 record or something in one-score games going into the playoffs. And then Daniel Jones earned his contract by beating us. So maybe that's what's waiting in store for the Chiefs. But I mean, the last drive, it was just good, solid football for Kansas City. I think the Chargers had taken the lead with 6 or 7 minutes left to go in the game. And then Kansas City just ran a very efficient drive where they weren't getting huge chunk plays, but just getting 5 or 6 yards at a time and running out the clock until it got down to 1 second left. And it was kind of just step on the Chargers' throat. They can't do anything to stop you. The Chargers responded well. They were down 13-0 at halftime and then put together a 17-point second half. But right now it's the Mahomes and Andy Reid voodoo mad. They're on their second or third kicker right now too, and it still doesn't matter. So everything is going Kansas City's way. It
is until we get the playoffs. I'm just loving it because when you lose one game in the playoffs, you're done.
Yeah. Now, what's going to frustrate me if they just win by one singular point in every game throughout the entire playoffs, I'll be frustrated if that happens.
Yeah, I will too. And not to mention, I just don't want them to win a third in a row. I don't care if it's history. So, Bengals.
It's not history, by the way.
Oh, it's not. We've
done it twice.
3 in a row.
Not Super Bowls, but world champions.
Well, you can't really count world champions. I used to have a guy who was always talking about the world champion stuff.
Hey, if we're going to NFL champions, the Vikings have one. So we got one.
We got one.
The most recent one that's happened just in the history of the NFL, not the Super Bowl era, was Vince Lombardi won the last year and then the first 2 Super Bowls. That was the last 3-peat, Vince Lombardi.
Technically, the Vikings won the last NFL championship, though, because after that it was just they merged the NFL and AFL for good after the first 4 Super Bowls. So the Vikings, even though they lost that Super Bowl, are the last NFL champion. We've had that title for my math is terrible. 54 years now.
There you go. You got to remember something.
Right.
Even if it was 54 years ago.
The Bengals beat the Cowboys.
Finally.
Not surprised. Love that.
Oh my gosh.
And the Bengals scratched and clawed their way to get to 5 wins so far this year. And they're going to play the 3-win Titans this coming week. And according to Bill Callahan, who knows what can happen in this game. So.
Jamar Chase played out of his mind in this game for fantasy football too. One of the players in our league, Jacob Nelson, my brother-in-law, he runs his own personal family league that I have opted out of because I can't focus on more than 2 leagues. I can't. And but my sister took my place in that league overall, and she's a set it and forget it lady, and in auto draft and you get it right. But her auto draft gifted her Josh Allen and Jamar Chase, and so this week she demolished, and she could have won with just those 2 players on her team against an entire roster of other people. She also had someone else of significance that scored quite well, another receiver this week. I don't remember who it was, but she said it, forget it. She's second in their league heading into the playoffs. Jacob Nelson is out of the playoff picture.
He is
out of it. And my sister's she's looking pretty good.
Back in your other league, is Matthew Thomas still in playoff contention?
Matthew, I think almost actually Jacob Nelson ran the numbers. Technically, the playoff thing is set unless some very odd thing happens. There's a team called the Diamond Dogs in 4th place right now. Previous champion of the league, myself, which would finish it. And I'm only 1 game ahead of the 5th place team, but I have 100 points more in the tiebreaker. So I would have to almost not score anything this week, and they'd have to go over 100 points to be able to make it into the playoffs. That person in 5th place being my wife. So it is a bit tight. And she is getting a bit closer with this win over Matthew this past week because the Colts were on a bye week. But I think our playoff race is pretty much closed. She could technically make it in. It would take a lot for that to happen. It's not likely, but it's not impossible at the moment. I don't have any plans on benching my entire team either. There's no plans for that.
Yes. Well, hey, let's look forward to some games coming up this coming week. I think if you look at this slate coming up, there's 3 or 4 games that look like they're going to be really good, and there's a lot of games that are like, okay, maybe there's a storyline here. Maybe this is important to one of the teams. As you guys look at that roster of games coming up, which ones are you excited about?
I'm excited. Packers visiting Seattle, obviously, as a homer team. I'm wanting that to happen. I still like Seattle a lot as a team. The Packers are going to have to prove a couple extra things in this game and pull out I think a sizable victory. I think they need to have more than a 1-score game, maybe a 10-point victory here for a lot of people just to ease tension after this past week. But Seattle is, in my mind, a playoff team. And so this is going to be a significant game to play.
Is there a chance, if you lost to Seattle, that then there would be you guys leaving the wild card race right now? I mean, because we have some 8-win teams, right? Let's see. We've got in the NFC, Eagles probably will take their division, and then the Commanders have 8. Lions will probably win their division, with Vikings getting one of the wild card spots unless something would flip there, but those 2 probably in. Unfortunately, Buccaneers or Falcons, one of those has to go in. I doubt another one from there is going in. And then probably the Seahawks or the Rams, but again, probably not another one. So it looks like right now you're still sitting in a good spot.
If we lost this week, where we are right now is, according to ESPN, we're at 6th right now. So there's 7 total spots. We're 1 game ahead of Washington, Washington would have to win this week, which I think is doable. I think they play the Saints. Green Bay would have to lose. And I'm not sure if there's really a tiebreaker there on who would take it because we'd both be 9-5. I'm not sure who would take that tiebreaker. Let's say Washington got it. The Packers would go to 7th. Then looking up at us is the Rams, and we're 2 games ahead of them right now. So we could not fall out of playoff contention this week. But potentially it would have to be 3 weeks because the Packers have the tiebreaker over the Rams as well.
Yeah. So, and I will say this, I was reading something about Washington at the beginning of the year. Remember, I was like big on Washington to win this division, especially after that start. I was like, man, who's going to contest against them right now? Obviously, Philly is going to contest that division. But looking back, the Washington Commanders, I can't remember where the stat was, but I read it. They have won against all of the teams who are not good, and they have lost against all of the teams that are good, as far as like winning records. So it does kind of put it into perspective. They had a very weak beginning of the schedule, and they played those right. They did what they were supposed to do in those, but now they've got to kind of step up and get to that next level. The teams that are winning teams, they need to get in and contend there a little bit. So
there's one other game I'm really excited for. It's going to be an AFC NFC matchup happening in Philly Sunday afternoon. The Steelers are going to play the Eagles. We were just talking, both of those teams are really solid right now. So if we get an Eagles team that shows up differently than they did last week against Carolina, I expect a great game. If we get the Carolina Eagles, I'm not expecting too much of a great game. That'll be a Pittsburgh win. But I think it'll be a fun matchup. 2 really, really good teams right now.
The Ravens will definitely be watching to see how they do, because that's going to affect them. We didn't mention it, but Buffalo-Detroit is probably going to be a great game and a very telling game as far as like which defense is going to slow down the other offense. That's kind of where you're at right now. They both have like pretty powerful offenses. Both of them have shown good defenses and are struggling with their defense, whether it's due to injury or just because they had like a really bad last game. So it'll be interesting to watch that. For me, Indy Denver is going to be a good game, because this is the only way Indy can stay in playoff contention. They have to, I mean, technically they would still be in if they lost, if a bunch of crazy stuff happened. But let's be real, they have to beat Denver. And then I think next week they play the Chargers, the other team that they need to beat. Both of those teams, if we could win those, that would go a long way. And then is that right that we play Chargers next week? I don't even have my schedule.
No, you guys play the Titans, but I think the Broncos play the Chargers.
Right, Broncos. I knew it was one of those. We then have like a really nice schedule, because I think we have like Titans, Jaguars, New York, Giants.
Yep,
we got some good losing record teams to help boost us in. Although that doesn't
some teams that are actively perhaps trying to get the first overall pick as well.
Right. But this week is going to be important for us. And then next week, one of those teams are going to lose.
My Nostradamus prediction right here for this week. And that's going to be the Colts beating Bo Nix and the Broncos.
Hey, I like this one.
So we're going to see a good Anthony Richardson game. I think Denver's defense plays well against teams that are good in structure. But as we saw with the chaos ball that Jameis Winston plays, they were not good against teams that play out of structure, and Anthony Richardson can play out of structure and be successful out of structure. So I think the Colts are going to win that, and I think they're going to intercept Bo Nix a couple of times as well. So I'm not perfect in my Nostradamus predictions. I fully realize that. I hope this does not bring a state of darkness over the state of Indiana if the Colts end up losing this game. But I am going to put my marbles in right there and say the Colts beat the Denver Broncos. I don't know if that's an upset. I don't know what the line is or whatever, but go Colts.
Yeah, you're right now. Your record's 1-1, so you're not putting the jinx on us. You've gotten one right, so I'm all behind that. I'm going to pick something different just so we all have a different one. But Brandon, would you like to do your Nostradamus pick?
I am. Because I missed the first week, I'm actually going to do 2, so all of our records can align. So I'm 0-1 right now. I was out the first week. of the state. So I could not predict. I'm going to do 2 predictions. I'm going to go Raiders over Falcons in Vegas,
Okay.
and I'm also going to go Houston over Miami in Houston.
You took mine. Okay. I was going to
Sorry,
go
Matthew.
Houston over
Sorry.
Miami. I may have to look around here and see. I have another one I can fall back to. But I do like that Houston over Miami. No. I'm sorry. I had it picked the other way because I see if it's going to be an upset, Miami has to beat Houston.
Well, if you look at the records, I think Miami's the hotter team right now in terms of momentum.
But what about wins?
I wasn't looking at wins. I was thinking of momentum. Betting line for Houston, Miami. Let's see what the sports
Miami's got
bettors are
6
saying.
wins. Houston has 8. So yeah.
The Texans are the 3-point favorites.
Yeah. So are you still picking that one?
Matthew, you go for it. And
I'm taking
I'll come up with
Miami
another one.
to upset over the Texans, to beat the Texans this week. My fallback was going to be Carolina beating the Cowboys because Bryce Young has been like doing fairly well, and this could be the place where he could win. And I mean, it'd be hard for Carolina to not be an upset if they beat anybody, even if it is just the middling Texans, right? I mean, Dallas Cowboys, Texans.
As much as I want to say it, I'll bring it up as an honorable mention that almost makes me want to vomit. Bears over Vikings. I'm not going to go.
What?
I hate the Bears so much. I'm going to go major upset. Giants beat the Ravens.
Holy cow! Yeah, that would be the biggest upset of the week if that happened.
That would definitely. Yeah. That's like what I felt like last week when you said Carolina beating who was it they played? The Eagles. Yeah. I'm like, what? Whoa. I know we're picking long shots, but that's a long shot. Okay. I like that one.
I'll go with that. Just I can't say the Bears are going to win anything. I can't do it. It's immoral. It's unethical.
It's immoral. Okay. So to finalize, Matthew said Miami over Houston. Brandon had 2, right?
I had Raiders over Falcons.
Which I don't feel like that's a huge one,
Ravens.
But Giants over Baltimore is huge. So, and then Josh, you had Colts over Denver, and I'll take it.
There we go. And then it's went out from there for Indianapolis because of the 3 easy teams, and they get into the playoffs and are one of the one first in or whatever, the first 4 in, 4 out that we did a couple of weeks ago. They'd be the only one that I have a chance right now at really getting accurate.
I'd have to go back and look at that 4 in, 4 out to see what I even said. I can't remember which teams we were even talking about at that time. We'll have to review that here coming up last week of the year. See what we got right on the 4 in, 4 out. So
yeah. All
right, guys. Well, it looks like it's going to be a good week of football coming up, and we are not actually going to be here the next 2 weeks. This is a good time to say this for anybody who listens to that next 2 weeks because of holidays. We won't be here, but you definitely come back 3 weeks from now when we'll kind of look back at all that has happened over the Christmassy time stuff just before. Or I guess will that be after New Year's? When is? I can't
It'll
even.
Be January 2nd.
January 2nd. So it'll be after New Year's as well, right? So, we can talk about all that. We'll talk about the Christmas games. We'll talk about, and at this point, we'll be almost at the end of the season, and we'll be able to talk about some of these. How do our 4 in, 4 out look, and what's the lineup of the playoffs really looking like? That's going to be a good one on January 2nd. Don't miss that one. That's when we'll be back next. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you all for joining us here on the Football Fandemic this week. We hope you have a wonderful week of football because we plan to, and we'll see you on January 2nd.